Welcome to Health Talk. Today we're going to talk about how to get into medical school. This is a timely topic because this is about a time when people apply, about 2 months before June 1st. So we have with us today Stephen Young, who is successful in applying to medical school, and he will be going to Tufts University School of Medicine in the fall. And I had the pleasure of meeting him, and today we're going to ask Stephen everything you want to know. So, who applies?
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Wu. Most of the applicants who apply are going to be either pre-med or non-traditional student. We have about 44,000 applicants apply last year in the 2013 cycle. So next year for the 2014 cycle, I expect it to be even more so than that, maybe about 46,000. And there's only about 19,000 medical school seats in all of America.
So there used to be 121 medical schools, but now you said there are more.
Now there's about 135 to 138 because more medical schools are being opened as newly accredited, such as Hofstra, such as the UC Merced and UC Riverside institutions. They're now opening up more medical schools across the country because of the doctor shortage.
They're predicting a doctor shortage simply because of retirement and also the need for primary care, and also because of the 2014 Obama Healthcare Portability Act to get more people coverage. So it'll be very interesting what happens with medical education, because NYU and some other schools are trying to create a 3-year medical school program. So what do you do? How do you apply? What's the whole deal?
Well, first of all, you have to take your general pre-med requirements, which is 1 year of biology, 1 year of general chemistry, 1 year of organic chemistry, and 1 year of physics. After that, you have to take the MCAT, which is the Medical College Admissions Test, and you have to take that sometime between your sophomore and junior year if you're going to be a traditional applicant. Otherwise, you need to take it within 3 years of your applying if you're going to be out of school, having worked or doing a career change.
So if you're a traditional college student, pre-med, you would theoretically have organic, your first year general chemistry as a freshman.
And your biology course.
And biology. And then as a sophomore have organic
Exactly.
chemistry. And then spring of junior year, take the MCATs.
Ideally, you would take that as a traditional student.
And then after you finish junior year, June, you would have your applications started. So all summer you're working on that, and hopefully get your applications in by June 1st of your, right after junior year. So by the time you're September a senior, you're just waiting to be called for interviews.
Exactly.
So theoretically, if you take your MCATs as a junior, you should have a very good foundation in physics already, because when you take it in spring of your junior year, they're going to ask you physics questions, and
Exactly.
you need to have a very good foundation. So you actually have to be half a semester ahead
Right.
to take that.
The normal route is to take physics in your 3rd year, and by the time spring rolls around, you should have had taken enough physics to pass the MCAT.
So in practical terms, this is difficult because people are studying hard already in college. And then to study for the MCATs is also hard. So that's why many people graduate, take a year off to apply, because school is so heavy duty.
Exactly. School is a full-time job, and to put aside an additional 3 to 4 hours a day to prepare for the MCAT is something that some people cannot afford if you're maybe working as well part-time, as many students are nowadays.
Or you're finding yourself. It's a time in college in America where people are finding their journey, where they are as a person, who they are, what is their whole makeup as a person, and that journey of their existence is very important to their stage in becoming an adult. And it's sometimes very hard for them to get straight A's, take their MCATs, and be on time.
Right.
It's a tough time for, So if you want to prepare, let's say there are many students who at age 3rd grade, like age 10, I want to be a doctor. There are people like that, and we all want to be like that. I had a non-traditional route myself because I majored in art history and then I turned pre-med, and then I went to med school. And you had a non-traditional route too.
Exactly. I took the MCAT in my junior year, but I didn't do as well as I wanted to, and I retook it a couple more times, always thinking about how I could better prepare myself. Additionally, I decided that I didn't want to apply straight out of college because I thought that it was a prime time to join the Peace Corps. I felt that I would never have had another opportunity like this after going to med school. I would be working and trying to pay off all my medical school debt. So I decided to join the Peace Corps because it was always a dream of mine when I was younger, and felt that I would apply to medical school when I came back home.
So I think that it's very interesting about the med school, how to get into med school. The traditional applicants are how many in that percentage of people who apply? Are they
Out of about 44,000 applicants, I would say that majority of those applicants are traditional, a little bit over 50% and the rest of them are non-traditional or reapplicants. And reapplicants would, of course, therefore be a non-traditional student because they did not get in the first time after junior year or at any other point.
So once, let's go through the process. Okay, so you're going to apply, and what do? You have to log on to some website and pay money. Tell us.
That's correct. You will log on to AMCAS, which is the service that's provided by the AMA, and through that website you have to register all your courses that you've taken. You have to submit your letters of recommendation that you're going to provide with, to the medical schools, and those can range from having a letter from a biology professor, a non-biology professor, a doctor that you shadowed perhaps, research, volunteering, a pre-med committee if your school has one.
You need 3 letters.
You need anywhere from 2 to 6 letters depending on the school that you
Minimum,
apply
isn't it
to.
usually minimum 3?
It depends on the school. You have to follow the institution.
There's a common app though, common application?
There is one common application, and you don't have to send all of your letters to every school. You can pick and choose if you so choose.
If you do the common application, you want to send the 3 standard letters. Is there a capability of doing that?
Yes.
Let's say you're crushed for time. Here you are, a junior, you're taking the MCATs, and you're already got all your straight A's or your A's and B's, and you have a 3.5 average. So here you are, you're in the best position because you're there in campus, your professors still remember you, and you get these letters. And is there a button to press where you can just send all of them to all of, is that the easiest? What's the easiest? And what's the hardest?
The easiest way is to submit those letters directly to MCAS, and the more complicated matter is to have those professors of yours submit them to another site such as Interfolio, where you have a little bit more control of which letters go to which schools.
Usually we, tell our advisees that if you're going to apply, you should ask those professors in this way: do you feel you can write a strong letter for me? Which is the hidden language is, will you write me a good letter? Because you don't want a professor who gave you an A 4 years ago, can't remember you, and writes a weak, tepid letter. He could win the Nobel Prize and be extremely famous, but if he doesn't write you a good letter, it's better to find a professor who likes you, remembers you, and says something nice about you.
That's correct. I've heard many admissions committee people tell me that it's better that you have a strong letter of recommendation than a weak or an average letter of recommendation, because that can hurt you in the long run, as most applicants will have good to strong letters of recommendation. So if you can find someone to write that for you, then you're better off not having that letter from that professor.
So going forward, I'm sure many people in the studio audience and out there in TV land and media land, that here you have your own child and you want your child to go to med school. We usually tell them that the child has to want to go to med school, not that you want them to go to med school. So let's say the child, the student really wants to go to med school, we would probably suggest that they start off as a freshman, seeing somebody who really likes them, meet a professor, glom onto them, really make yourself indispensable to this professor, because someday you're going to need a letter of recommendation from Professor 1, Professor 2, and Professor 3. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a science professor, preferably a science professor. But if you major in French and you're going to apply to med school, it could be your French professor. So we think that's important. And sophomore year, do the same. And this interaction where you really bond yourself with this department or professor or his study group or his lab group is a win-win situation, because you'll get to know the professor will get to know you, you can volunteer in his lab, learn to do his research, write a project, and really, in a way, be his apprentice, which in 300 years ago would be an apprenticeship. So this is what we suggest to students to do this, my mentees. I've been doing pre-med advising since 1987 when I was part of Harvard faculty back in Boston. So did you find that to be helpful, to find a professor?
I did. I worked with one professor for research for about 2 years, and I maintained a good relationship with my biology, organic chemistry professors, as well as a humanities professor at school. And I maintained that relationship throughout college, after college, while I was in the Peace Corps. And when I decided to then apply to medical school, I made sure to pay a visit to my alma mater in UC Irvine and spoke with everybody once again and had them write a strong letter of recommendation for me.
Now, once you apply and you get an interview, okay, so tell us this whole experience about the interview.
The interview process is very exciting because you know now that those schools like you enough on paper and they are willing to explore whether the option of having you in their class. And I was fortunate enough to have applied to 14 medical schools and have 5 say that they would love to meet me and interview me. And those 5 were UC Irvine, University of Iowa, University of Vermont, Tufts University, and Thomas Jefferson University.
Now, at the interview, it's almost yours to give away because you're more than 50% in. So it's kind of important because obviously they want to find out what you are like, because some people now in this day and age pay people to write the essay, who knows who wrote the essay, and they want to see if you are authentic and if you're real, if you really are who you say you are. And number one, the most important thing, can they trust a patient with you? And I think when they interview somebody, they really want to know, are you going to be nice at midnight in the ER covering call? And if you're applying to med schools all over America, can they trust you bedside to the dean of medicine's wife, the mayor's wife, the mother of the mayor, the state senator's wife? Because many of these med schools, the state medical schools, are very big, very well funded, and everybody goes there.
Right.
You know, the rich, the poor, everybody. And they want from everybody, all their med schools in their class of 100, their class of 200, they want their students to be compassionate, have the capability to have compassion, and to have the capability to always want to be part of that journey of excellent medical care. That we may not be the final person to deliver that care because you may only be a third-year medical student or a fourth-year medical student, but nonetheless that you will point them in the right direction. So what have been the tough interview questions?
I've been fortunate enough that most of the medical schools have had a pretty normal interview, meaning that they have a 30-minute to 1-hour interview and they just ask questions to get to know me a little bit better. It's been fairly conversational. I haven't been hit with the tricky ethical questions or the questions that are very, very tough in the sense of, oh, what are your weaknesses, or what do you think you can contribute most to the class? But I found that I've enjoyed most of the interviews very, very well because I got a chance to learn more about my interviewer, the school that I'm at and have a chance to show my interest in their school and why I want to go to their medical school.
Now, from the other side of the interviewer, the reason why we ask people, what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths? Now, I could see why it's hard as a 20-something to answer that because we're still in that journey. I mean, I'm not 20 anymore, but I'm probably still in the journey of what are my weaknesses, what are my strengths, because we're always reassessing ourselves, and especially when you're 20-something, you're finding yourself still. You're still forming your existence. Your existential self is still being formed. So it is a hard question. But the reason why interviewers probe is they want to see, do you have any insight? Can you at least say what are your strengths and the weaknesses? And then the other thing is the ethical questions. Probably the medical schools want to ask their applicants that because there are common now in medicine because medicine has changed so drastically. First with technology, with the capability of robotic surgery, of cloning the sheep, cloning twins, everything. You know, the medicine has so changed because the Human Genome Project. What do we believe in? Do we believe in abortion, no abortion? And if you are a believer of a certain thing, can you still deliver care? And what if you've never been outside of America and you are faced with an extremely multicultural population? How can you handle that? And so because America has become diverse and the fact that technology has changed everything, how can we bridge that and still be human and still be that person that Mrs. Smith is going to see and trust? Because we're still that representative of the entire medical profession. You know, sometimes, you know, I've been a doctor for a while now, and we hear bad press that, you know, we have no bedside manner, we're cold, we're detached, we're mean, we're arrogant, and it hurts all of us to hear that about ourselves, our colleagues, simply because we all try hard. And so when we screen medical students or people who are going to medical school, we want to find in them the core. Do they have that core to really be in the middle of the night, be just as nice, to wake up and say, I'm coming. You know, waking up and I'm coming at 2 o'clock in the morning is already an effort, you know. So for them to find that. So I'm glad you like the interviews. I think it's a chance for the medical schools to really see what you're like, because they do want to not take those who have the perfect MCAT scores, the perfect grades, if they have no real feeling for the patient. Those people with the perfect MCAT scores and the perfect grades will get in because there's always a certain percentage of seats left for those who we think in medicine will take medicine very far in science. But they're not the core group of applicants, obviously, because it's sort of a Gaussian distribution. There's always going to be the people who will be the future Nobel Prize winners and the main majority of who apply. And then there are some people who are applying, because they think, why not? You know, let me just spend a summer doing this. This seems like fun. Everybody else is doing it. I have nothing else to do. It seems like an okay course.
Yeah, it is. It's very expensive actually to apply to medical school. The primary application that I mentioned earlier that you apply into through AMCAS is about 130 for the first application, an additional 30 odd dollars per school thereafter. And so the first 15 schools can add up fairly quickly. And after that, every school will charge you to fill out their secondary application, ranging from $55, which was the cheapest, and up to about 120. So you add all of that up, and it's already over $1,000. Then the interviews, 5 interviews across the country. They were not back to back, unfortunately, so I had to fly 4 times, and those each cost about $400 for the ticket plus the hotel, a rental if I had to get a rental, food and whatnot.
You mean a rental car?
A rental of a car, and all that adds up together to anywhere from $600 to $800 that I had to shell out. So it is a very expensive process, and I would not recommend it to anyone to take it lightly, and to think that this is just I'll just give it a try this time. It's not going to hurt me, because it's going to cost a big hole in your pocket.
Actually, if you try it once and you don't get in, and 2 years later you decide, I really want to get in, those scores are still there in the computer memory bank, you know, your MCAT scores. And
That's correct. The MCAT score will be there forever. Since 2003, they've had a computerized version, and sorry, since 2007, they have a computerized version, and the scores stay in basically forever. But the scores won't be valid after 3 years or 4 years. It really depends on the medical school. So you have to check the MSAR, which is the medical school admissions requirement. It's a book available on the AMA website, and you can use that to verify how old your MCAT score has to be, what the 50th percentile GPA and 50th percentile MCAT scores are, what their lowest 10% and the highest 90% scores are, to kind of give you a rough idea of where you stand in terms of the applicant pool as well as the matriculant pool.
so what's the name of this website? Let's repeat it for the studio and the home audience.
It is the AMA, American Medical Association, and
Website.
yes, the AMA website. And you can also Google just MSAR, you can Google MCAT, you can Google any of these terms, and you can find out the exact website after that.
So once you get the interview and then you wait, what are the statistics? Tell us all the statistics. Like 44,000 apply, and what's the percentage of getting in the first time, the second time?
Well, 44,000 apply in a year. There's only 19,000 seats. So if you look at it in that sense, that's almost a 1/3 of a percent, or 33%. That's pretty good if you think about it that way. But it also means you had to apply to maybe all the schools, and then you would have a good chance. Individually, each school has about single-digit acceptance rates. Some schools might have something slightly higher, especially for public in-state schools such as University of Iowa or the UT system, where they're more likely to accept their in-state students, and so that percentage is much higher than if you were out of state and you're trying to apply in, then your percentage might be in the 0.1% area. Now, for schools,
What happens, let's say you want to apply to Iowa, you live in California, and so in-state, do you think it's 33% acceptance? Probably
it's
not.
a lot higher.
It's higher?
It is. I believe, if I recall correctly, the University of Iowa has about 500 applicants from in-state, and they interview 300 of them, and they accept 100 of them. Well, 100 of them will actually matriculate, so they accept more than 100 of them. And out of state, they only have a seat of 40, and they interview probably a bit more than that, maybe 400, 500, and they have way more
So it's
applicants.
10 to 1.
Very, very, yeah, very low.
So what happens in private medical schools? Let's say Tufts or Case Western or the Ivy League ones. They
So for
take
Tufts,
anybody.
They take anybody. Tufts and Jefferson, they think they both have about 10,000 applicants a year.
And how many people in the
And about
class?
Jefferson has 250 and Tufts has about 200. And each school will interview about 800 students, roughly. I think Jefferson will interview about 1,000. And out of that class, they will then determine who is going to be accepted and who will be deferred and who will be rejected. So once you make it to the interview stage, you have really and truly beat the odds by 10 to 1 already.
So 10,000 applicants and a class of 200, let's say, average. Once you go to the interview, how many they interview? Repeat that.
Jefferson, I believe, it was 1,000.
So 1,000 for a class of
250.
250.
And for Tufts University, I believe it was about 800, and class of 200.
So it's 4 to 1 or 5 to 1, better than 10,000 for 200.
Exactly.
So once you get into the interview, you're really in a good situation.
You are. You have truly and clearly beat the odds of standing out on paper. And now they want to see who you are as a person. Does your story stick with your application?
Now, let's go through when. So usually June 1st, the website opens for you to send in the application.
It's going to be the first Monday of June, so that can change every year to year.
So first Monday of June.
From the first Monday of June, we advise that students submit their primary application completely on that day so that AMCAS can verify it. And the first takes about 4 weeks to verify. But
So
as
then
you
now-
go later on into the season,
It
it
takes
can take
longer.
up to 6 to 8 weeks to verify.
So
the
let's
longer, the later you send it in, the longer it will take, and the longer it will be before the schools will receive your application, and then they can send you a secondary application.
So let's pretend we're perfect, in a perfect world. First Monday in June, you get yours in. You've logged it on. Then, 1 month later, presumably, July,
Before July,
bef-
yes,
you will start getting supplementals.
exactly,
I'm assuming you're the perfect applicant.
exactly.
And then you should send those in immediately,
You should send those in within 2 weeks,
within 2 weeks. So now we're middle of July.
correct?
So then
Co-
you have probably another month to hear. So people start hearing about interviews August and September.
The first interviews will go out for the early decision applicants because schools need to make a decision on them by October 15th. So those applicants will be interviewed probably sometime in August and September so that the admissions committee has time to make a decision on them. Thereafter, the normal applicants will probably start be interviewing at September, October, November, December, January, February, March, and April. April is the last month.
So we're closing for our home audience. So to summarize, to create a perfect pre-med life for yourself, choice one is biology, general chemistry, freshman year, organic, sophomore year, physics, junior year. Take your MCATs in the spring, get your application in first Monday of June, the summer between junior and senior year, and then hopefully your life is golden and you'll get in by November or October 15th if you're an early applicant. And then the non-traditional applicant, more common now as people are finding their new career paths, to get the best MCAT score possible and strive for the first Monday of June.
Same thing for them, exactly.
And we can correct glaring flaws. You know, life is not like permanent. So people, Stephen has said himself he's non-traditional and he's been very successful, and you've heard him speak. And so we think you have a wonderful career ahead of you. Thank you for joining us. And for the studio audience, if you want to create the perfect pre-med, we've given you the recipe. And if you want to become the perfect pre-med, you can start all over if you want to be non-traditional and take the 2 years baccalaureate, post-baccalaureate, and get the pre-med courses. There are only 5 pre-med courses. And thank you for joining us on Health Talk, and we hope this has been helpful.